Welcome back, everybody, to Rip City Real Talk. It's another episode. You're here with Anthony Blaylock and Craig Moshkow, and this week we actually have a super special guest, somebody we've tried to get on
Yeah.
for a long time. From Blazers Edge, it's Dave Deckard.
Blazers Edge. Is that an old guy joke?
Sorry.
Look how nervous he gets. You're a big deal, man. You're a big deal for us. We started doing this because really you and then Casey Hodal's old podcast with Freeman. So we kind of got into it listening to you guys for years now. So it was an inspiration for us. So we're a little nervous, as you can tell. You can't even say the Blazers Edge correctly, but that's all right. Good job, Craig. Way to start us off hot.
Didn't practice
Blazers Edge. I mean, the team's getting older. They're not in their 20s anymore.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today, and regardless of age, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this week's kind of, as we told people, going to be a season preview. We've touched on a lot of stuff already recently in the last couple of weeks. We'll kind of put it all together now and get one final oomph going into the regular season, one final bit of recap things we've noticed from the last couple of preseason games, which quite frankly isn't too much. But yeah, a lot of new players, a lot of new faces, especially along the bench. We obviously have a new coach. So there's going to be a lot of little changes here and there for the team this year, whether that be positive or negative. It's still a stacked West. We're still going to be right there, in my opinion, with some of the bottom half teams competing. I guess they're going to keep doing this playoff bubble thing, so that'll be probably where the Blazers are going to be hanging out most of the year. So yeah, it's kind of what we're going to talk about this week. To kick things off, man, I think we're going to just dive right into the biggest accusation. We'll talk about it for a little bit, but the biggest addition to the team was obviously Chauncey Billups. Have you noticed anything in preseason, either of you, that you think is going to be relevant as far as how he's going to run the team schematically different than Stotts, Craig?
Schematically, I mean, there's things that he tried to implement during preseason that looked good. He tried to have Nurkic run up and hedge on screens. He didn't play drop coverage on defense. Offensively, it was very muddled. I couldn't get a lot of perspective on what he was trying to do with the offense. So maybe Dave can help us out with that strategy. But defensively, it looked like he wanted to be more active and help more. He wanted to cut off driving lanes. He wanted to make sure we were attacking shooters on the perimeter. That's what I gathered from that end of the floor. Anything from you, Dave?
Yeah, nothing in preseason looked good. So you've got Nurkic coming out, or the centers coming out against screeners to try to pinch them or trap them up there at the top. Just try to stop the penetration before it starts, because that's been the Blazers' trouble. They don't have guards that can keep opposing guards out of the middle. It looked good or decent as long as they actually stopped the ball there. But as soon as the ball got off of that level and went inside, all heck broke loose. Now, there were some plays. I mean, if the opponent was just lazy and ran it right down there, of course, someone can come over, like Robert Covington or Larry Nance Jr., and bother the ball, then they slow down a little bit. But the problem with that is the second rotation. Then if the guy with the ball in the middle kicks it out to the sides of the court, nobody covered. Nobody closed out. And you saw a host of opponent open three-point shots. Now, it was preseason. They didn't make them. But does anyone think the Warriors are going to shoot like 1 for 10 to start out in the regular season? Probably not. So Portland's going to get torched if they don't do a better job with rotations. Also, Nurkic isn't really – I mean, he's making the initial move, but he isn't always consistently closing back on defense. So even the middle gets somewhat exposed. The only thing worse than that is when they don't rotate at all. And we saw that too. We saw some weakness in individual defense all across the board now, where just pick a random Blazer and drive on them, and it ended up with a dunk or an alley-oop. Those are big problems. The defense did not look better, and this was what was advertised. So that's an issue. Mm-hmm. On offense, look, there are two things going on. First of all, they're trying to get the ball down the middle more, either into Nurkic, which is semi okay. Depends on how quick he moves. If he can turn and spin and he catches it on the move and keeps moving, it's usually good. But if he stalls with the ball, it's a turnover or it's a slow play. And either which of those is going to be a problem for the Blazers, because they prosper on volume of shots, and getting the first open shot, they're not getting that anymore. Also, if it's a guard in the middle, you can flip a coin whether everybody else is ready or whether that guard just kind of shoots it. It's a little weird not having the offense come from Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum up top.
Right.
Fair enough. But here's the thing, and then I'll shut up. The last preseason game, it's like the Blazers said, screw it. CJ is just going to score, and Norman Powell is just going to score. And they're like, look, this is what we do. And they did it. They actually scored all right, but that's not the offense, right? So you have this dichotomy that's going on between what they appear to want to be, or what Coach Billups wants them to be, and what they're actually good at right now. And it might take a while to resolve that.
Agreed, 100%. And especially, it's great that you brought up the point with Nurk kind of having the ball in his hand more, because it sounds like from everything we've heard, that's one of the big things that they want to change with the offense, is having him get the ball at the top of the key and facilitate a little bit more, which is fine. I like that he can pass. We've seen it. He can make good passes when he wants to, and when the offense is ran to do so. He hits cutters pretty well, especially small guards. We saw it over and over last year where he'd hit Dame on a cut, and that's great. But as you say, I mean, the further you get Nurk away from the basket to start running the offense, the further he is away from the basket, which is not ideal for somebody unless you're going to be throwing to him while he's running towards the basket on a pick and roll or something along those lines. And trusting him to consistently run the offense as a big, it doesn't seem like it's going to work as much as they want it to. You're taking the ball out of Dame and CJ's hands, which I know historically it slows things down because they're both ISO scorers and they're going to look to attack with their specific skill sets. And that has been a slight issue. But trying to move the ball and trying to run through Nurk more and more at the top of the key, to me, I just see it being a bit of an issue when it comes to volume. And that's exactly what you said. I mean, these guys are going to need to have the ball in their hands more and more, especially Dame and CJ. And it's fine to start games out and to feel it out to see how they're going to defend it. But as the game goes on, I just don't see how they can realistically continue to have Nurk be involved as a passer, like he's Jokic or something.
They tried it in a couple ways, actually. They tried him first out on the elbow, and that wasn't really working because he's holding the ball, and there's not a lot of good angles there, right? Nope. I mean, someone has to cut in order to make that work.
Right.
So what they did then is they moved him down closer to the low post with his back to the basket. But when he's at a standstill, he's still slow, and the other team is able to cut off his angles. So the one thing that worked was when he was coming across the lane or rolling toward the hoop and caught it on the move. And as long as he's moving and someone else is moving, he looks really good because he can catch, make an instant read. The defense isn't set. He can get that pass right out of his hands. He's great. Or if he's on the move, he gets the shot up right away. But when he's holding it, all bets are off. He's just not – he may get better at that. I don't know. But he's not good at it right now.
Right. I mean, we'll see. I mean, they brought in specific coaching to try to work with that. The examples from some of the other teams that these guys have worked with, it's been all right, but it just seems like they want to make him such a focal point when it comes to having the ball in his hand. And it just doesn't seem like it's something Nurk has done historically. And it's going to be interesting to see how they integrate it with Dame and CJ being out there at the same time and not having the ball in their hands to run the show.
If I'm being honest, what I think is going to happen the first and second quarter, you're going to see Chauncey try to use a lot of people, and you're going to see Nurkic facilitate and play and get the ball a lot. But that shot equity is going to diminish as things turn to the fourth quarter and it's a 2-point ball game, and you're going to let Dame and CJ run the show at that point. I honestly believe that. Dave, do you think that this is going to be something where Chauncey's actually ripping the ball out of Dame and CJ's hands?
No, and Dame and CJ I don't think would allow that, nor would Chauncey stop it if they just took over. But here's the thing. The Blazers weren't the second best offense in the league because they were the highest percentage shooters. They got up more shots than anybody else. That's how they managed that. So if you go through Nurk, it's slower. But if you go through Nurk, there's also more turnovers. And that's the thing that they absolutely limited. That's one of their secrets to success. They get a shot up every time. As soon as they don't get shots up every time, and as soon as they don't get shots up as quickly, that means they're going to have to work that much harder on the defensive end to make up that gap. Right? And part of the problem in the preseason is that they've been committing the turnovers. They haven't been scoring the points. And the defense hasn't picked up. So there's no forward momentum really happening. The defense is stalled and the offense is going backwards. They got to fix that this week because they're not going to be able to go through the first month of the season figuring this out and end up with a 33% winning percentage and then have to make it up in the succeeding months. In past years, they've done that, but we know how that story ends. It ends up with them being, at best, mediocre. And mediocre is not going to cut it this year, so they got a big cliff to climb right away, right now.
Yeah, especially with the beginning of November. I mean, looking at the stretch there in that schedule, you're not going to have too much time to figure things out before you start to dig yourself in a hole. And you can't dig yourself in a hole in the West and come back out. I mean, you just can't do it. So it'll be I agree. I don't think they're going to be able to pull the ball out of CJ and Dame's hands. I think habits alone come the end of these games if they do continue to stay close. I mean, Dame and CJ are going to resort right back to what Dame and CJ do because that's what's made them successful. You're going to see Dame come up. He's probably going to go to one of the corners, and he's going to determine whether or not he's going to shoot or drive, depending on what the defense is doing. And you're going to see CJ get the ball after moving around a little bit. He's probably going to dribble in, and he's going to try to take shots, most likely contested, and we're going to have to rely on him to shoot them. The one thing I am looking forward to, hopefully, when we talk about the ball movement being a priority, is I want to see a little bit more of CJ getting involved in the passing game because I know he can pass. I mean, we've seen him make decent plays. When Dame's been hurt, he's come out and flirted with triple doubles left and right. I mean, we know he can get the assists going when he wants to because of the way he can dribble and get guys off kilter. But I'd like to see it be a more constant part of his game. I'd like to see him be able to take it out of Dame's hands a bit more and let CJ really facilitate. That takes it out of Nurk's hands as well, which is fine by me. But when you can get guys like Rocco and Norman Powell and Dame out on the outside ready to hit threes and CJ can draw people in and make more passes instead of trying to take a shot that's more contested, that's where I think Billups can come into play, what he did with George. And that's the one thing offensively that outside of Nurk getting the ball in his hands more, I do look forward to with this team if it can be executed because CJ could very well start causing a bunch of turnovers or second-guessing himself and not taking shots that he should probably take because he thinks, hey, now I got to go and pass the ball. This guy was open, and this is the new mantra of this offense. So it'll be interesting to see how they roll that out and how it impacts the two stars and what they decide to do with the balls in the hands. So
yeah, I think CJ and Dame are just going to revert to form, and I think they need to. You know, and unless you change the personnel on this roster, that's what you're good at.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, the other problem is what's the safety net, and they have none. See, the thing is, like you could look at Terry Stotts and say, well, maybe he's lost his audience and maybe he's not as effective in terms of after 9 years talking, everybody's tuned him out. I don't think that was ever entirely true, but let's say there's a percentage that after so many repetitions, you're not listening. Fine. But there's also a solidity in that you know that if things go wrong this week, they're going to revert back next week, and it's probably going to even out. It'll be fine. You don't have that. You have a brand new coach. You have no idea if he can coach because he's never coached anywhere. You have a brand new staff. You have a brand new system. You have Damian Lillard, who has put this team on a clock, and anyone who thinks that clock isn't running isn't paying attention, right? And you have other guys, you have CJ McCollum, who just turned 30, and who, by the way, Dame has always said, Blazer, I'm a diehard, forever and ever. I haven't heard that from CJ. I think CJ wants to play. I think CJ wants to win. I'm sure he likes Portland. I don't want to speak for the guy, but if you traded him to Boston, I think he'd still be CJ. It probably wouldn't make much difference. So you have nothing gluing this team together. You have every reason for this team to fall apart. If you start looking at a losing streak and things aren't working, and they're sitting there looking at each other in the locker room like it was Clint Eastwood, with the standoff, like with who is it? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And the continuity and the confidence fall right through the middle. You could see this season fall off the rails. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that potential has not been there for the last few years. You knew that at least you had that safety net. It's gone. So I don't know what I'm doing if I'm in there. I don't know what I'm doing if I'm Damian Lillard and this isn't working and we're losing 110 to 85 every night. I'm taking over. But then what do I do if I'm Chauncey Billups and Dame is taking over and I can't do anything about that? Where's my credibility? I have none.
It's going to be
a disaster here.
It's going to be, and I agree with what you said because Stotts had a way at least he was so good offensively, mind-wise, and the plays that he was able to do, and he was able to run these guys that it carried us more often than not. Yeah, you give up a lot of points, but you score a lot of points. You take a lot of threes. I mean, the last couple of years, we're constantly in top 3 in threes attempted. I mean, that's how they built the team around Dame and CJ. You go out and get Rocco because he can hit a lot of threes. Yeah, you wanted to help defense, sure, but you didn't just go out and get a defender. You got a guy who historically shoots in the high 30s. Then you go out and get Powell, another guy who, sure, his defense is fine, but you traded away Trent for him because he can also shoot threes, and you knew that you might be able to get him here longer. You built threes around these guys because that's how this offense is ran. Drive in, kick out. That's where Dame gets his assists from. And so bringing in a new coach and not, I get it's kind of hard to make a move. The only move, we all know what the move is, and it didn't happen. But now you're asking him to come in and run a team that was really built for a different system that can probably still flex a little bit. I mean, they're all going to be able to do a little bit of things that you want them to do still. Sure, they're not entirely one-sided, but as you put it, when it comes into it, trying to change a whole new system, if you start to fail early and you can't work with the system that was in place, it starts to get bad fast, because now you're trying to deal with coaching Lillard and you're trying to deal with coaching CJ, and they're trying to take over and do what they normally do. And it's just going to be weird to see how he handles it. I like that Scotty Brooks came in because I think he has some experience that can really guide him. I don't like that Chauncey is going to have to probably rely on that a lot and early, but at least it's there. It is going to be interesting to see how well they gel. I do like that we at least have the same 5 starters in some capacity for chemistry. I know they didn't have the series against Denver they wanted. They didn't have a lot of time together, really, just with Powell there the second half of the year and Nurk being hurt most of the year. And they still did pretty good. So I hope that that'll carry them for a bit, at least from making up for mistakes, knowing what each other likes to do.
Mm-hmm.
That should be helpful early on, but it's not going to last very long if they start to lose games, because for all the things you just stated, I mean, you're not going to see Lillard sit here and lose bad over and over and over and then have a good mindset come trade deadline time. Like, it's going to be a little rough.
The starting 5 outscored Denver in that series. It was really the bench where we lost, or they went on big runs against us. So I'm not as worried about the starting 5 as I am the bench and how Chauncey and they can figure that out, because we don't really have. Okay, we know Anthony Simons knows the system, or he knows our players, but we have no idea
the system anymore.
Well, but he's played with our players before,
right.
So he knows when he's going to check in, what he's supposed to do, and he knows his role. Larry Nance, Cody Zeller, they don't know their role. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know how to play with Dame and CJ. So 4 preseason games, and Zeller was hurt for those 4. I'm very nervous about how this bench is going to come in and make the waves that we need it to make in order to sustain the play of the starting 5. It's a talent-based league, right? Nobody worries about the system that LeBron plays in because it's LeBron. And Dame is basically the same way. I still think that there's going to be a lot of times where he just takes the game over, like Dave said. He's not going to sit on the sidelines and watch this team struggle unless CJ is absolutely cooking. Then he'll do it. But after the starting 5, I don't know who's going to play the most minutes off the bench. I don't know if Larry Nance is going to be a small ball 5 or if he's only going to play 4. And so that's where my questions lie. And is Dennis Smith Jr. going to play point guard, or is he just is he just a bench filler? I don't know.
So let's talk about that. So we talked about Chauncey being the main addition as far as the big change. Obviously 9 years of Stotts. Now we go into Chauncey time. So that's a big addition. But then this team completely revamped the bench for the most part. I mean, you're still going to see Amp out there, and you're still going to see Little probably play good minutes, more than he has previously. But outside of that, I mean, you're talking quite a change with McLemore and Smith and Nance and Zeller left and right. They went out and basically changed his bench all around because it was pretty rough watching Carmelo and Cantor at the same time. I mean, there's not much you can do there, especially when it comes to trying to monitor minutes. I mean, you're not going to start Melo over Rocco, and you're not going to start Cantor over Nurk. So it made sense that we're going to probably play together a lot anyway. There's a lot of people that made a big deal about that. And I think there were times you could have taken them out of that, but for the most part, they're backups. And that was just how the roster was built. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's what you were working with. And it's kind of hard to work around that. So that's gone. And now you bring in Zeller, who I like. I think he's just a hard-nosed guy that's going to come in and know his role and do his job. The thing with Zeller is he's kind of – we talked about this already quite a bit, but he's injury-prone. I don't think he's played over 60 games the last 3 or 4 seasons. It's been rough. And then you bring in Nance, and as you and I both know, playing a lot of fantasy basketball, and Nance is the same way. The guy doesn't play full seasons, not very often. So I like these two additions. When we talk about replacing Melo and Kanter, they're definitely better. We're going to get better defensively, and we're going to get better ball movement wise because we know Nance can sling it around. He's actually quite a good passer. But can we trust him to stay healthy? And that's my number one concern, especially considering we just got Smith and we brought Dennis Smith in and didn't get Chris or Patterson, which I think it was the right call. And I think you have these guys on call if they don't get signed somewhere else. They played in your system a little bit now in preseason and practice, so you can easily bring them up if a guy gets hurt. But to me, you're putting a lot of stock into really three bigs on this team, all who tend to be a little injury prone. I mean, Nurk's been freak accidents, sure, but it kind of gets interesting to me to see how those two work together.
We lost Dave, but we'll just keep rolling with it. He'll probably
lose Dave.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. So it goes to you, man. What do you think we're going to see from these two major additions when it comes to the size backup advantage?
I mean, I think Larry Nance is going to play 4, and I think that he's going to be the natural fill-in for Robert Covington. If I was to suspect, I think Zeller is going to be the backup 5 and probably most important. And I don't want to say the most important player off the bench because he's not going to be the most important player. But when Nurkic rests, which he is going to have to rest, Nurkic is not going to play more than his usual 30 minutes. He just cannot do it. I think that's going to be
a stretch. Yeah,
I think 28 to 30 minutes is like maximum for Nurk. And that guy, his health and his conditioning are going to be two of the most crucial factors for this season. But I think Zeller is going to be really important. Dave, what do you think about like the backup 5 minutes?
It'll be interesting to see. Now, Nance Jr. looked better at the 4 than the 5, I thought, in preseason. He's quick and he's fluid. That's good. As long as you depend on him to intercept passes to make rotations, you'll probably be okay. But with the center, I mean, your center eventually has to come down back home. And when he's back home, he's not really huge. And by the way, the NBA is slowly getting bigger at that spot again. And especially in the West, you've got some centers to reckon with. So I don't think Nance gets a ton of – I mean, he might get minutes at the 5 because there's no one else. But I don't think that the Blazers can ultimately depend on him as a 5. I think he's a 4. Zeller is going to set good screens, and he's going to be a good all-around player. He'll sneak up on you. He'll be great.
Okay.
But, again, like you said, how much between them do they play about one season? That's the thing. And if they're not playing, who's left? That's a huge issue. Also, honestly, Anthony Simons, knowing people, he's coming into a completely different role. They're trying to play him at backup point guard. And he's done okay, especially when backup point guard means scoring. His setup has been, depends where he is on the floor, depends how he's feeling, depends how he's, I mean, there's a lot of variables in that. I'm not entirely convinced he can play backup point. I think he's better off ball. So if he doesn't do that, then you bring Dennis Smith Jr. in there, fine. But now you got to play Simons somewhere, maybe. And he's not really changing the game at shooting guard. I mean, he's progressing. He's just like, is your bench really better? I mean, is your bench really, really better? I think defensively, as long as Nance and Zeller are healthy, you've got a strong argument. Offensively, probably not. Is your point guard, is your guard rotation better? Or are you just depending on those 3 guards that you always depended on? I'd argue it's the latter. I'm not sure this team is really deeper. I'm not sure this team is really more skilled. I think this team has 2 better players right at the 5, 6 spots, right? And maybe they're better at the 8 spot. But I don't see that they're night and day better than they were last year, frankly.
No, I will say better because it was tough watching Kanter and Melo out there together. But better is a relative term when you say that it's going to be a difference maker throughout the year. I mean, that's the big deal here. I mean, better, sure, probably. Nance, I would take him over Melo at this point, and I would probably take Zeller over Kanter. Loved what he did, and he did it very well, but he did too much not well that was just too hard to make up for, especially obviously on the defensive side. So, sure, I'll take Zeller over him. That's an improvement in my book. Not much, but an improvement. I like that you brought up the guards because that kind of brings us to the other big addition recent is Dennis Smith. And after the last couple of weeks, I really thought for a while, and I didn't like it, but I thought that McLemore was going to for sure be the backup too. They were going to add some shooting out there. They were going to let Amp run the point guard position, use Nance's passing to try to kick out and get guys like him involved. Didn't like it. Don't really care for McLemore in general. He's just been passed around too much and nobody else seems to care for him enough to keep him on a spot. So I wasn't impressed. But Dennis Smith, to me, changes things a little bit. Again, not a guy that I'm really hoping to come in here and make a complete difference. I do like that he's going to attack a little bit more, but he's very similar to Amp to me. Not the shooting, but their athletic play style and the ability to drive at the rim. Amp is weird. Amp is weird to me because we didn't get to see what he really can do. We still haven't. I mean, they ran the offense through Carmelo so much last year that really you just threw Amp the ball and said, hey, go shoot 70% plus from the three-point line and, attempt-wise, and that's going to be your role. And then, yeah, once in a while you'll bring the ball up and pass it around. But we've historically ran him so much with guys like CJ coming in and playing backup point guard, and they've had to rely on kind of the two guards shifting there to really get anything out of Amp. So he's the biggest wild card to me on the bench this year, and he has to be. He has to show that he can improve, because if he doesn't improve – I mean, the guard play is going to be Damon CJ playing 35 plus again, having the rotate point guard duties probably, and then you're right back in the same situation that you've been the last however many years.
I think you stagger Damon CJ more. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I just don't see Dennis Smith Jr. playing a lot of backup one, and I don't see a lot of Anthony Simons facilitating an offense the way Dave is talking about. He is a fantastic shooting guard when his confidence is there and he's ready to attack like a lion, but sometimes he comes in and plays like a lamb. So unfortunately, I wouldn't trust him to run an offense night in and night out. I would stagger more. Now, Chauncey's going to know from practice sessions, and he's going to be able to judge whether Anthony's ready for that role, but I just don't see it. So I think Damon CJ should stagger more minutes.
I mean, what do you want Simons to do? I mean, the catch and shoot three is a huge strength. I mean, you don't want to take that away, but you did take it away because you put the ball in his hands, and he's not shooting as well off the pull-up, when he's playing point guard as he did with that catch and shoot. And you just knew it's green light, it's coming to you. For that reason, shoot it quick. He was great because he didn't have to process anything, didn't have to second guess. What else do you want him to do in the offense? My argument is he'd probably be great if you could cut and throw it to him. I mean, he won the slam dunk contest.
Yeah. For years we've been saying that. Get the guy to the rim.
He'd probably be great on the fast break. But the Blazers don't do either of those things and won't do either of those things as long as they have the backcourt they have. And Nurkic is not going to do it consistently either. He's not going to flip alley-oops to people. Nope. So he's not going to be able to do what you really want him to do best. So what you got to do is make up for what you're keeping him from doing with the playmaking. And that's a foreign rule to him, or he's just coming into it anyway. I don't see how the math on this adds up. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean he can't have a good season. I think he probably will, I hope, but that kind of transcendent season where this is the answer and the lights all came on, that's a little bit of a long shot, I think. And it's who else? I mean, Robert Covington, you can't get much more out of him than he's giving, and he's been great. Mm-hmm. Nurkic, we already covered. Dame and CJ are maxed out. And by the way, aging, that's another thing. Like, nobody's talking about, hey, how much better can Dame get? Remember that? That was like, 3 years ago. Everybody's saying, wow, okay. They're saying he's great. Hopefully he'll continue to be great, but if he's going anywhere, any direction, it's going to go down. I mean, can he sustain? Now becomes the question. Where's the growth curve with this team? I mean, you got Larry Nance Jr. Cody Zeller's not going to grow. I mean, he is what he is. It's a good addition. But Larry Nance Jr., what can he do? That's one big question. And then half a roster full of minimum contract players. That's what you're hoping. There's the growth curve. Mm-hmm. If it's not Ant anyway. So I'm just wondering how all of this adds up to, it's like that classic step 1, step 2, step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yep.
Step 4, profit. I don't see, the question marks haven't been answered.
No, and it's the same core we've had for the last couple of years, and it's still going to run through this same core. I mean, you can there's 100 different Norman Powells you can go out and get. Guys that can shoot the three, sure. I mean, they're replaceable. I'm glad we got him. I like what he can do. Sure, he's more aggressive than CJ. Honestly, all this conversation all offseason about trading CJ worked really well for me because I thought that Norm would just slide to the 2 and you could go out and get a forward. Ben Simmons plays forward for you, a point forward role, whatever. I like what Powell can do, but even then you limit him because he's not going to evolve. He's not going to change to be this crazy fast break running rim attacker. He'll take his opportunities when they're there. You'll kick it out to the 3. If a guy over pursues, he'll go around them and go up and draw fouls like he did last year. But for the most part, this team is still going to revolve around the same core. And it's as you put it, Dame's probably not getting any better, and he shouldn't have to. The dude's a superstar. And CJ, he started last year 26 points a game. That's great. He's going to be an all-star. This is the year. And then he goes and get hurt. Then you bring in Powell. Now you've brought in another guy that's going to take shots from CJ and get 20 points a game, ideally. It does come down to whether or not some of these guys on the bench can fit and do enough to keep the guys where they're at or build on a lead, which is probably too much to ask for. But if they can just go in there and maintain, which is something that we struggled with really the last couple of years, is just maintaining where we were at, whether it was being down by 5 instead of going down by 10, 15. That's going to be the biggest question. I hope personally that Smith gets the backup point guard role. I'm still going back and forth on this because I'm still processing and being officially on the team and everything. But I do think that it opens up Amp to stay at shooting guard. He made strides last year when he was making decisions. He was a better passer than I think people gave him credit for. He still had plenty of mistakes, but that's because he played sparingly, and that's what they were telling, hey, go do this now. We want you to be backup point guard. Okay, sure. He is much better suited to me to be a shooting guard. Just like you said, get those spot-up shots, take advantage, attack off the ball, and that's the role that he was. And Smith is a great passer. He lacks a lot of attributes, but the guy is a good passer. I mean, consistently, he's a triple-double threat. I mean, he's been there. He can rebound. He's athletic, and he's a decent passer. So having him run the ball more to me, sure, take advantage of a gap and go attack the rim. Do what Dennis Smith does. But the ability to pass out of that allows guys, in my opinion, like Anthony Simons and even Nasir, which we haven't talked about yet, and his role on the bench is probably going to be major this year. He's going to most likely play the backup small forward, which is your wing defense with him and Nance on the backup unit. But to me, I like the idea of Smith over Amp running the point guard positions. And that's kind of where McLemore comes into play, because before it was ideally going to be Amp and then McLemore, which just made my stomach cringe when I was thinking about those guys out there together. But
I do think Nasir Little's ready to take a leap. I mean, if we're talking about growth, he's going to have to be him, and Anthony Simons are the only two that really have a lot of growth left on this team. Larry Nance has a little. As far as Nasir Little goes, though, I mean, his skill set is pretty defined, right? I mean, he's going to defend. He's going to shoot. He's also missed a lot of time due to injury. He's been banged up a lot the last couple of years. So that's been part of the reason we can't rely on him to come in and take those leaps. So, Dave, what do you think about Nasir Little this year?
That whole small forward position is going to be interesting. So if Nasir Little excels, what do you do with Norman Powell? I get it. I didn't mention him. I guess there's some growth potential with him too, at least as far as he integrates with the team. But now, look, we're running up against, is everything going to happen? Because, you got Dame maintaining 28.8 points a game. You got CJ at 24, right? And then Norman Powell's going to score 20, really? And Nurkic is going to have an expanded role and touch the ball more and be really happy, right? And then Robert Covington's going to hit all his threes. And Larry Nance Jr. is going to revolutionize the defense. And Nasir Little's going to make a lead. And Anthony Simons is going to be a point guard, who, by the way, also scores 14 and keeps shooting 42% from three-point line. All this is going to happen, really. Because I don't see enough minutes or shots for even half of that stuff to happen. And by the way, none of it, the only thing that you've mentioned on defense is Nasir Little and Larry Nance. So, and I believe Nance, but that's not enough. And again, Norman Powell is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's say he doesn't score 20. Let's be charitable. Let's give him 14, 16. Okay, he's good. But what did you do? Did you fix the defense with Norman Powell? Or do you have another hole there, right? Did you create another hole because you're playing a 6'3" small forward? and his 14 points a game is offset. Maybe it's not averaged by opponents scoring like 16, but you have another vulnerability in addition to your ones at point guard and shooting guard. So now all three spots are vulnerable, and Larry Nance is going to fix all of this, right? Yusuf Nurkic and Robert Covington is going to fix all of this. And by the way, Nurk's not going to foul out in 15 minutes.
Oh, man. We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, him coming up, the new defensive scheme where they want him to run up more. That's great. Yeah, you're going to go up and attack this point of attack, and that's fine. He's going to help out with pick and roll and screens, and that's great, except for the fact that he tends to get a little too passionate when he's up there. He tries to make too many plays on defense. He tried it too much in Denver. There were too many times in that Denver series. I'm like, why is Nurk up there even fouling a guy above the 3-point line? Like, I mean, I'm great you're trying to help out, but maybe just keep your hands back, bud. You're a little too slow to be poking at guards that are going running around. And so that's a big deal because we can't have him foul out. I mean, that killed us in the Denver series. I mean, there was a lot of problems, sure, but him fouling out often and early in a lot of those games was huge. And then you just can't have a guy who's, so used to his size. I mean, he's athletic. Don't get me wrong. He can chase guards. He can make up for stuff, and he'll be able to do that. And there'll be these fun, splashy highlights that we'll get to see of Nurk making a block from behind, and it's going to be great, and everybody's going to cheer, except for the fact that a majority of the time he's probably going to draw an extra foul or two being out there if he's too involved trying to stop guards because Dame CJ can't stop guards. And this is your big fix, is that you're going to have, your giant center out there trying to get in the way and plug things up, which is fine. Sure. Like you mentioned, until the second rotation, and then he's trying to run around and make up for it. And, who knows what happens there. It's going to be a big deal with him. There is no fix for defense on this team. There just isn't. I mean, Powell helps. Sure. He's going to be an okay help defender, but you start playing up against teams with bigger forwards, the Michael Porters of the world. Good luck. Good luck. He did okay in the playoffs, but Porter still made him look silly sometimes as well. He's not going to be able to do this consistently. What are you going to put him up against LeBron? Like, hey, go out there. You're now because you can't take Rocco away from Anthony Davis. You just can't do that. And so it's just going to be a struggle with the size, and there's no fix for defense. I mean, the bench might get a little better if Nance can slow guys down a little bit, sure, but it's not like Amp and Dennis Smith or even Macklemore, whoever they decide to run at the backup guards in the rotation. They're not slowing anybody down. Amp has the athleticism for it, but he doesn't have the mindset. He doesn't have the ability, at least that I've seen, to be able to read where the ball is going to go and to not foul. He gets caught too much trying to do too much.
Well, I guess I'm sorry, Craig, but let me hop in for a second on this. What are the Blazers trying to do? They're trying to contend. That's what they got to do. They can't just go out there and be the same. They're trying to contend. We're talking about a team trying to contend. And we're talking about whether Ben McLemore or Dennis Smith Jr. is going to make the difference. That tells you everything. Are the Lakers talking like this? Mm-hmm. Are they going, who's Shecky Gruberman on my 14th man? No insult to Dennis Smith or Ben McLemore. Legitimate NBA players. Love them. Glad they're on the team. But if you think that's the critical thing that's going to make you a champion, that's awful tough.
I think the biggest leap that this team could make is Dame and CJ being better at the point of attack defense. And what I mean by that is I know we're all gonna do the same thing, which is choke on our water when we drink it. But if this team is going to make a leap, we have to be better at stopping the A+ guards in this league, and Dame and CJ have to be accountable for that. The other thing that you're going to have to see, and you've already talked about it a lot, which is health. And Nurkic's fouls are going to be a problem. I think Dave recaps a lot of the Blazer games when he writes about them on Blazers Edge, and a lot of the time, Nurk will get 2 fouls or 3 fouls over a really quick stretch, and that will kill us. I think Nurkic is going to have to figure that out and stay in really good shape throughout the year. But yeah, I mean, the bench, I don't have a lot of answers. I have a lot of notes, but I don't have a lot of answers for the bench. So we're just going to have to see if they make that leap and if they can get better.
Well, it's funny that you say they have to get better at stopping the A+ guards, because I wouldn't call Monty Morris and Austin River A+ guards, and they looked like A+ guards when CJ was out there trying to defend them. So, I mean,
I get it.
Well, let's talk about accountability for a second, because I heard that line too. I'm going to hold people accountable. Really?
What word? I haven't heard that word all offseason.
Yeah, because, dude, you're Mo Green. You're Mo Green in this movie. You don't buy us out. We buy you out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're gonna replay tape and you're gonna look down, down at Damian Lillard sitting there and say, Dame, that's you. I mean, you might be able to do that once if Dame allows you to make the point. And cool. If Dame is on board with that, fine. But seriously, you think Chauncey Billups is going to come in and call out Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum in Portland on this team? You think that's really going to happen? Or they're, how close is he to losing everybody at that point, especially if they're not winning, right? What if Dame's scoring only 21 in this new system and CJ's at 20, and both of them are they're nerfed on offense, the team is losing, and Billups goes, you know what? This is about defense. It's about you. They've got a lot of other excuses before they get to their own defense to blame this on. And most of us human beings would take those. So, yeah,
you're a leader both, I think, at your church and within Blazers Edge. When you're managing people, your stars and the people that are productive, you give them a little more grace in coaching, right? Like, you don't micromanage them as much. Your bottom performers and the people that are on the bubble and need to earn it, a lot of times you coach them a little harder, right? And so it's that's just the way it is in management now. And Chauncey's not going to be any different. Dame and CJ are going to get some passes. If it's egregious in practice or if it's egregious on tape, he's going to have to address it. But he's going to be coaching a lot of the younger guys harder than he's going to be coaching Dame and CJ, because Dame and CJ are what floats your boat day in and day out. They're what get you wins.
Right.
Well, and also you can't pull out of people what they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that Terry Stotts. Sure, I believe Terry Stotts came to a peace with his backcourt and how they were going to be able to defend. But I don't think Terry Stotts spent all 9 years here going, it's okay, whatever you do out there on defense. He probably had a discussion or two with Dame at some point, and look, this is it. Realistically, this is what they can give. You can dress me up in a tutu and put me on stage. It doesn't mean I'm going to be able to dance Swan Lake. I can't do it. So
well,
I don't see where accountability is going to come into play here.
That's my favorite word, accountability. And I think I said this the other day on one of our episodes, but there's a word inside of accountability, and that's ability. And at some point, it's just funny that word keeps getting thrown around, because I agree with you. I don't think these guys have the ability. Effort-wise, sure. We could see maybe a little more effort. There's been a couple times where I saw Dame and CJ kind of in the middle. I'm like, yeah, you could have probably pushed that on that guy. It probably wouldn't have made a huge difference, but you could have put a hand up and ran at him. I don't know. But as far as the recognition, like knowing where a guy's going to be and being able to stay in front, the footwork and that kind of stuff, they're just not built for it. They're not not Drew Holidays out here. They just don't have that natural talent to be able to get in there and really slow a guard down consistently. If there's going to be plays, I've seen Dame go up and make plays when he's tried. Sure, he does it sometimes, but it's just not there consistently, and it shouldn't have to be like required of them to do it. I mean, we want to see effort, but like you said, the ability is not there. And if you're going to commit to CJ and Dame being your backcourt, and that's the dream backcourt that we're going to have, we're not trading CJ away for Ben Simmons, and it's just not going to happen. Fine, then you have to be okay knowing that you're going to give up a lot at the point of attack. And I understand trying to bring Nurk up and try to cover for that. I want to see how it works. Hopefully maybe it does work. Maybe he doesn't get into severe foul trouble. Maybe he does recover well. Maybe the team on that second, third rotation cleans it up, and Rocco and Norman Powell become these wing defenders that we brought them here to be. Maybe. But it's going to be so hard to see that just go into fruition until we've really seen the season start. And everything you said, like, there's not really one thing that's going to change this team consistently, except for maybe some of the bench play to hold some of these leads. And if they can pass a little more, I'm all for it, as long as it doesn't make these guys second guess themselves. I don't want to see them down at below the basket and not take a layup or slam dunk it, try to pass out like Ben Simmons in the playoff, because they're confused about whether or not they should be making more passes. So it's going to be interesting. The defense from the two guards is just not going to be ideal. And it never is going to be.
Well, but something that has changed a lot from this year, the turnover from last year, this team has a ton more athleticism. And I know that you're going to sit there and say, well, on the starting five, it's the exact same. But in the people we brought in. Larry Nance is extremely athletic. Zeller's not a stellar athlete, but he's certainly an upgrade over Cantor. You subtract Melo, and now you have Anthony Simons and Nasir Little playing probably a lot more minutes. I mean, I don't think Ben McLemore is going to play a lot more over Nasir unless Nasir makes some silly young mistakes. This team does have more athleticism. I don't think they're going to get out there and run. They're not going to have a track meet every single week with another team, but they should be able to cut to the basket. They should be able to attack the rim. I do see improvement there. Dave, do you disagree?
No, I think they have the potential.
Okay.
But again, when have Portland's guards ever made those passes?
Mm-mm.
When have you? I mean, you had Derek Jones Jr. You had airplane mode on your team last year, begging. The only thing you wanted the guy to do was cut down the baseline with his hands in the air, right? They got nothing out of him. Nothing. So
it was all Stotts, though. Of course it was, right?
Of course it was. Terry's like, please do not dunk the ball. We don't want that. Yeah. So, like, I'm not saying that I agree. Mm-hmm. The thing is, does this all translate into output? And here's the thing. You sat and listened to offseason about, oh, we have cap space this offseason. Oh, we've stockpiled a lot of draft picks. Oh, we've got, other things. Here's what we can do. Okay. That's been the explanation from the front office. It's all about what might happen and what has the potential to happen. The actual output hasn't happened, right? And including in 2016 with the cap space, including in 2017 with the drafts, including with every proposed trade that's ever come down the pipe, basically, other than, Yusuf Nurkic, Larry Nance Jr. Okay, we're talking about the same thing. This is literally Portland's MO. This is the culture. Look at all the things we might do. It's like looking at plastic food in a restaurant display. I could have that, or I could have that. We can't eat any of it. Mm-hmm. And when you actually go in there, half the stuff isn't in stock, and the other half flip a coin whether it's overcooked or not. Okay, reality is not living up to the plastic, and this is Portland's culture right now. This is Portland's MO, and you could see it in preseason too. By the way, okay, they were confused. They were not cohesive. What did they default to, even when the starters were in? Let's give them a pass for all the minutes that all the lower roster players played.
Sure.
What did they default to? Not rotating, staring at balls, stuff like that, right? It's literally, unless they're prodded, unless they have a clear path to success, they don't know how to make one. And that's the way they've substituted so many other things for success for the last decade. It's headlines or awards, or on Tuesday night, no one's ever scored 45 points with 8 assists and 9.5 rebounds.
One of my favorite stats, trust me.
Exactly. This has been success, right? Literally, I'm not sure this team knows how to succeed anymore. This franchise doesn't have a culture anymore. What this franchise has is Damian Lillard.
Yep.
And he's been the substitute for everything. Problem is, maybe you don't have him much longer. Then what? Then what differentiates you from a non-rotating piece of crud team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, except you don't have Cat at center?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's true, because we did the same thing. It's funny. I was talking to him the other day, and I was like, man, last year we were so stuck. Melo was going to come out here and get 16, 18 a game. Trent's going to hit all these threes. Look how he did in the bubble. Oh, now we got Derek Jones. We're going to cut so much, and there's going to be so much rim running. It's going to be great.
I fell for that.
You did fall for that. It just didn't happen, and I think we're doing I get worried that it's just, as a fan base, I think this is part of it too, being in a small market and having some of the success. You're able to buy into these little things a little easier, and you shouldn't. But every year it's like, okay, then this little change is going to do this. This little change is going to be that. And this is going to be so much better. End of the day, we kept the same core that we've seen year after year after year. They're not going to change that much unless they make a big trade and they do it fast. I think that's the only thing that can really save it. I just think if they don't make playoffs this year, which is a very realistic thing. I mean, Memphis is going to get better and better. They got healthy if they can stay healthy. You got the Spurs are always just tough. I don't care who's on that team. All these no-name young athletic players still give you just a tough time all the time. We don't know what the Pelicans are going to be, Zion's health aside. But there's so many teams right now that are going to be in that bubble space that you could very easily miss the playoffs, especially if you get off to a poor start. And if that happens, I mean, you get 1 year maybe of saying, oh, it was a new coach. Maybe you can force it. Neil would probably force it. That's what he likes to do. Well, it was a new coach, this year, new system. We took too long to get blah, blah, blah. But if Dame decides that this is the year that we don't make playoffs in his first time and he really wants out, he's putting up all-star numbers. He's hanging out with all these guys, talking at the Olympics. I mean, I know that's not the Olympics, but my point is he's made all these connections now. Mm-hmm. And if he does go and you're stuck with CJ, I don't. It's tough to think about. And you're right. It's all we have is Dame, and he's the only reason that they have a winning mindset because he comes out there and does these incredible things, and the team's able to buy into it for a bit. And then Dame cools off, or nobody else does anything to help Dame. The playoffs. And then it's just kind of a matter of what else do you have?
They could succeed. I'm not saying they can't.
No.
But something's really, really got to change. Mm-hmm. And it's got to change. Now, they're not just going to walk out there and succeed. They've got to have a radical shift in outlook, culture, drive, all those things, as well as the talent, which is what you wanted to see. But they're sitting there, instead of the fireworks, they're sitting there in preseason trying to light a match, and they can't even get the match lit. That's not a great sign.
They're going to start slow. I hate to say it, but they are going to start slow. The Blazers do that a lot. They start slow, and then they sort of pick it up around the All-Star break, and then Dame has some 2-week heroic, unbelievable stretch. We start talking about him as MVP. This is, I mean, it's categorical at this point. But what I'm saying, I do think that they can get better throughout the year. The other thing that
I hope so, yeah.
Well, here's the thing, though. It's all dependent upon Larry Nance Jr., Cody Zeller, Nasir Little, Anthony Simons. I mean, the starting five is going to do what they did last year, which is be moderately successful. Will they be able to contend against elite teams? I don't know. In the playoffs, things get really gummy and they struggle a lot. But I'm not worried about the starting five. I think the bench and Chauncey's system and whether or not it can be incorporated and it can be sustainable. Also, what type of adjustments are we going to make? Are we going to do the same thing every single game? Are we going to come out with the same system every game? Are we going to come out with the same rotation every game? So I think that this team is going to have to be malleable, and I hope that they can do that. But we are going to have to be patient because I know the Blazers fans want to, sit here and say blame Chauncey, but we're kind of in the boat now. Like we have to see this team either succeed, and if they don't, Dame is going to be a little upset. So. I'm not rooting for them to fail, and I know you guys aren't either, but I do think they're going to start slow.
The starters, I think, will be all right. I think they'll start okay. It's really going to be how fast that bench can catch up and what we learn in our rotations. And realistically, I agree with you. So much has been made about how deep all of a sudden we are. I'm sorry, you're not. Minimum contracts don't make you deep. I mean, yeah, Nance helps if he can stay healthy. Yeah. And then really after that, you got a lot of mysteries, quite frankly. I mean, young guys in this team that are going to get more minutes than they probably have before. We don't quite know what we're going to get out of them. We can sit here and assume from what little glimpses we've seen, but we don't really know what we're going to get out of Simons and Little. And then you have a whole slew of the Snells and McLemores and all these great guys that can come in and shoot, and that's fine. But we don't know what their roles are going to be yet. So it's going to start slow in the sense of how this bench gets into gear and how fast they get into gear and how fast they can cover for injuries and things like that. Like we know what we're going to get out of Nance if he has to go in and spell for Rocco. Does Nance play more in the final closing minutes instead of Rocco? How many of these situations do we get in where it's like we don't really need shooting right now, so Rocco can come out. Nance, we need more. I mean, it's going to depend on so much of how these guys integrate themselves and where we can find spots for them. That'll be the fun part of the season. I'm looking forward to it personally. I look forward to it every year. I get a little too excited about it, and then you start to see the Rodney Hoods just not do what Rodney Hoods are supposed to do. And my gripe with Derek Jones all year last year, so I won't touch on that anymore. But it's going to be an interesting thing. I don't want to touch too much more on it now because we're kind of getting to that point where I know you had some questions. I think we pretty much touched on all of our expectations for some of these guys are what we think is going to happen, and I'm going to leave it at that. So I know you have some questions, especially having Dave here to answer. Why don't you start throwing them out there?
Yeah, Dave, we got some questions for you. So who do you think is going to be more important off the bench this year, Nasir Little or Anthony Simons? Who's going to be the more important night in and night out?
Right now it's Simons, but ultimately he's more replaceable. But I'm going to stay with Simons because I think Chauncey Billups will try to mold him And I'm not sure Chauncey has confidence in Nasir Little. And frankly, I'm not sure Nasir has. I mean, he could be great. You're right, he's a growth edge, but he wasn't always. So, yeah. But by the way, they could also trade Simons midseason. They if this doesn't go well, they're going to make a midseason salary dump. So he'll be more important as long as he's here.
Okay. Anth, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I like Little because the thing with Little to me is that the size, because of the lack of size that we have after Zeller and Nance. I honestly, I want to put that. I bet you Little's probably the biggest guy we have. I mean, Greg Brown, but I don't even count him. So
you guys are just sleeping on Snell. I mean, Tony Snell is an amazing. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't think either one. I don't think him or McElmore. They're just so limited, right? Nasir Little has the ability to be a two-way player on both ends of the floor at a decently high level, and he's still young and cheap, right? So
I just think it's his size to me. That's what makes him important. But Amp is going to be the bigger key to how successful the team is. I mean, whether he can run point guard or come in and really just do what he was essentially drafted for, which is just to score. I mean, I don't care if you pass the ball, just go out and score, play confidently, drive a little bit more. I want to see him drive more than he does, because I think that pedigree that he has is a full certified slam dunk champion, that I'd love to see him go to the rim and draw more fouls and get up. But I agree. I think it's got to be Amp. I mean, Little's great, but he's only going to be relevant if injuries kick in and he has to go slide over to power forward or something like that. And that's when his values of importance goes up to me.
I room Nasir Little with Larry Nance Jr. I just here's you two walk together all season long, and to see if little Nance Jr. a little bit of him rubs off on Nasir.
I like that. Sure. Okay, another question we had from a fan. What happens to Anthony Simons if they break up the Lillard-CJ duo this year? So let's say we do trade CJ for something that's not another guard, which would make sense. What would happen in your eyes with Anthony Simons, Dave?
It's already in the works. I mean, he becomes the third guard, right? Filling both positions. You get kind of Danny Ainge action, although that's heretical to mention Anthony Simons and Danny Ainge in the same sentence. But if he can play a little bit of point and play a little bit of shooting guard, all of a sudden he's got 26 minutes a game. And then I think we really get to see what he does. So I would be in favor of that, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, because I don't think his role changes that much. I would assume if you're trading CJ away, it is for ideally a forward of some sort, whether it's a power forward, then you move Rocco down, or it's the opposite. And then you probably at that point move Powell to your shooting guard. The money, the skill set, I think Powell ends up taking over shooting guard duties if you traded CJ and it wasn't obviously a guard that comes back. So to me, Amp still runs the same role that he's been running. Like you said, he's going to back up both guard positions. He's still going to be required to come in and score. I don't think he starts or anything like that. Not right away. Now, you just signed Powell to a big contract, so he's going to be here for the next couple of years. So it's not like, unless Dame does everything, just we're not even going to say the hypothetical hit the fan, everything blows up. Let's just say you trade CJ and that's that. Then I would assume Anthony Simons stays the same role.
You better have a lot of faith in them. It's like when they let Wes walk in 16. Like, you better believe that you have Anthony Simons ready to make a CJ McCollum type leap that he made that year in a most improved player situation. Because I don't trust him night in and night out to contribute at that level, but we'll see if he gets there.
Yeah.
That's all I got for some questions. I'd want to keep it under an hour. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think honestly that's all I really have as far as a preview, just kind of breaking down the roster for people, and there's a lot of new faces, so a lot of stuff that's going to be intriguing to watch as the year gets going here. I don't count preseason too much. A lot of guys didn't play their normal rotations or minutes, etc. There are trends that are obviously bad that you don't want to see, but I'm going to be optimistic about it and say I don't think we're going to see too many of the bad trends when the season starts. It'll be a learning curve for sure, and you're going to see mistakes, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as some of those preseason scores and percentages and all that nonsense. It's just, you're not putting your full effort out there and things like that right off the bat. It's preseason. You're just getting your legs back underneath you, especially Dame, who just got off the Olympic train. Like, it's not going to be something to be too upset about yet. I'm not going to overreact over a couple preseason games. Now, first 2 weeks of the season, if it's looking like that, yeah, sign me up for an overreaction. But that's about where we're at with that. Just for people out there, we want to give you, David, just another quick second. We've already kind of introduced you, sure, but if you have anything else you want to add about yourself, this is I want to give you and any guest a chance to kind of promote, I guess, or really just say anything that you have, anything that you might be working on. I know Dia kind of shared some stuff with us, and it was kind of cool for fans to get to learn more about her. But give you that second.
We're pretty good. We're just doing our season preview at Blazers Edge, and we'll cover things as usual. It'll be the most interesting year of the last since 2015. This was the last time we had this amount of uncertainty. And that's despite big bumps in 2016 and 17. So it'll be the most interesting year we've had in half a decade. So let's follow along and see what happens.
Agreed. And again, people, if you subscribe, like, do all that good stuff, it's fun. Follow us on all the socials. Great. If we do get to the 500 subscriptions, we're doing the free pair of tickets for whatever game comes after that. So that's going to still be a thing for anybody that continues to follow us. We appreciate the support. We'll be up on all the podcast sites as normal. Dave, seriously, it's awesome. We've reached out to so many people, and so many people are like, yeah, we'll be on the show, and then we never hear from them again. So I appreciate you committing and taking some time on Sunday to talk with us. It's so cool to pick your mind. We love engaging with you guys, the media people on the socials, and talking with fans, and just kind of getting into it and conversing our favorite team. So it's really cool that you took some time. Again, you're an inspiration for us as far as the podcast game goes. We love the work on Blazers Edge. So thanks for taking some time.
Thanks. Wholly undeserved, I'm sure. We're glad to have you around, and good luck to the Blazers this year.
Yeah,
Let's
for
go
sure.
Blazers.
All right.
50 wins incoming. Just like that, we're out.